The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Una Park stepped onto Station Orion 7 for the first time. She carried one bag over her shoulder. Her black hair was pulled back tight against her head. She wore the gray uniform of a first-year cadet, and she walked with the quiet confidence of someone who had trained her whole life for this moment. The station was massive. Lights of every color blinked from walls and ceilings. Aliens of dozens of species walked past her, some on 2 legs, some on 4, some floating on gravity pads. The air smelled strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. Una took a deep breath and kept walking. She was the first human to ever attend the Galactic Naval Academy. Back on Earth, this was considered a great honor. The news channels had talked about it for weeks. Politicians had made speeches. Her mother had cried at the spaceport. But here, walking through the crowded halls of the station, Una felt very small and very alone. The other cadets noticed her immediately. They stopped their conversations. They turned their heads. They whispered to each other in languages her translator could not fully catch. "Is that the Deathworlder?" asked a tall creature with skin like blue glass. Her name was Kira, and she belonged to a species called the Velothi. She was speaking to her friend, a forearm being covered in gray scales. "It must be," her friend replied. "I heard they actually let one into the academy this year. Can you believe it?" Kira watched the small human female walk past. She had expected something more frightening. The stories about Earth were terrible. A planet where the gravity crushed bones, where the air was filled with poison, where creatures with hundreds of teeth hunted in packs, where the natives had evolved to chase their prey for days without stopping, running until the animal's heart exploded from exhaustion. But this human looked so ordinary, so fragile. Her skin was soft and brown. Her eyes were dark and calm. She was shorter than almost everyone around her. "She doesn't look dangerous," Kira said. Her friend made a sound of disagreement. "That's what makes them dangerous. They look weak until they're eating your face." Una found her dormitory room after 20 minutes of walking through confusing hallways. The door slid open, and she saw that her roommate was already there. It was the blue-skinned Velothi she had seen earlier. Kira jumped up from her bed, her crystalline body making a soft, ringing sound. "Oh, you're the human. I'm Una," she said simply. "I hope we can be good roommates." There was an awkward silence. Kira's people had never lived with a human before. She did not know the customs. She did not know if she should offer food, or shake hands, or run away screaming. "I won't hurt you," Una said, reading the fear in her roommate's body language. "I'm just here to study and train. I promise I'm not going to eat anyone." Kira let out a nervous laugh. "I didn't think. I wasn't worried about. It's okay." Una smiled. She had been told that smiling frightened some species because it showed teeth. But she also knew that hiding who she was would only make things worse. "You can ask me anything you want. I know there are a lot of stories about Earth." Over the next few days, Kira discovered that living with a human was not as terrifying as she had expected. Una was quiet and polite. She kept her side of the room clean. She studied late into the night, reading military history and tactical theory on her datapad. She exercised every morning, doing strange movements with her body that she called push-ups and sit-ups. "Why do you do that?" Kira asked one morning, watching Una lower her body to the floor and push herself back up over and over again. "Humans need to maintain their muscles," Una explained between breaths. "If we don't use them, they get weaker." That sounds exhausting. You get used to it. But not everyone on the station was as open-minded as Kira. In the dining hall, in the classrooms, in the training facilities, Una felt the weight of hostile eyes following her everywhere. The worst of them belonged to a cadet named Torvak. He was a Keleth, a species with 4 arms and skin covered in small, hard scales. His family was old and powerful. They had produced admirals and generals for 7 generations. He believed that the academy belonged to species like his, and that allowing a human inside was an insult to everything his ancestors had built. "Look at it," Torvik said to his friends during lunch, pointing at Una with one of his 4 arms. "Sitting there like it belongs here. Like it's one of us. Maybe we should teach it a lesson," suggested one of his companions. Torvik smiled. His teeth were small and sharp. "Not yet. Let's wait and see how long it lasts. These Deathworlders are supposed to be tough. I want to see how much pressure it takes before it breaks." Una could hear them. Human ears were better than most species realized. She kept her eyes on her food and said nothing. She had been warned that this might happen. Her commanders back on Earth had prepared her for hostility, for prejudice, for fear. "You are not just a cadet," Admiral G.A. Kang had told her before she left. "You are an ambassador. Every action you take will shape how the galaxy sees our species. Be strong, be patient, and whatever you do, do not give them a reason to call us monsters." So Una ate her food in silence. She ignored the whispers. She focused on her training, her studies, her goal of becoming the first human officer in the Galactic Navy. At night, alone in her bed while Kira slept peacefully across the room, Una sometimes allowed herself to feel tired. She sometimes allowed herself to miss home, to miss the blue sky and the green trees and the sound of rain on her window. She sometimes wondered if she had made a mistake, but then she would remember why she was here, not just for herself, but for every human who would come after her. If she succeeded, she would open doors that had been closed for centuries. If she failed, those doors might stay closed forever. She would not fail. In the darkness of her small room, millions of light years from Earth, Una Park closed her eyes and prepared herself for whatever came next. She did not know that the real test was still ahead. She did not know that Torvik was already planning something that would change everything. But even if she had known, she would not have run. Humans never ran. That was the one thing the other species had gotten right about them. When cornered, when threatened, when pushed to the edge, humans did not run. They fought. The surgical team worked on Torvik for 11 hours. Keleth facial bones were complex hundreds of small pieces that fit together like a puzzle. Una's knee had shattered most of them. The surgeons had to rebuild his face piece by piece, using synthetic materials where the original bone was too damaged to save. They said he would never look quite the same. His family arrived on Station Orion 7 2 days later. They came on a private ship, surrounded by lawyers and diplomats and media representatives. Torvik's father was a senator in the Keleth government. His mother sat on the board of 3 major corporations. They had money, power, and connections across half the galaxy, and they wanted blood. "The human must be expelled," Torvik's father announced at a press conference. "She must be charged with assault, tried in a galactic court, and sent back to her planet in disgrace. What happened to my son was not self-defense. It was attempted murder." The story spread across the news networks. Deathworlder attacks fellow students. Human cadet shows true nature. Is Earth too dangerous for galactic society? Commentators debated whether humans should be allowed on space stations at all. Some suggested that the entire species should be quarantined on their home planet. Through all of this, Una stayed in her dormitory room. She was not under arrest, but she was not allowed to attend classes. Kira brought her food and updates. Sunho came to visit when he could. They both told her to stay strong. "The truth is on your side," Sunho said. "The footage shows everything. He attacked you first." "His family doesn't care about the truth," Una replied. "They care about revenge." The hearing was scheduled for the end of the week. It would be held in the Academy's main assembly hall, with representatives from a dozen species watching. The Commandant would preside. Both sides would present their case. And at the end, a judgment would be made. Una spent the days preparing. She reviewed the security footage again and again, noting every detail. She collected her 9 harassment reports and organized them by date. She practiced her testimony until she could deliver it without emotion. On the day of the hearing, she put on her dress uniform and walked to the assembly hall with her head held high. The room was packed. Hundreds of cadets, faculty members, and visitors filled the seats. Cameras floated near the ceiling, broadcasting the hearing across the galaxy. At the front of the room, a long table had been set up for the Commandant and his advisors. To one side sat Torvak and his family's legal team. To the other side, Una sat alone. She had been offered a lawyer. She had refused. She would speak for herself. Commandant Vrel entered the room, and everyone rose. He was ancient Adrasik, who had lived through 4 major wars. His scales had faded to gray, and he moved slowly, but his eyes were still sharp. He took his seat at the center of the table and called the hearing to order. "We are here to determine the facts of an incident that occurred in the secondary gymnasium 5 days ago," Vrel said. Cadet Torvak of the Kelith Empire claims he was the victim of an unprovoked attack by Cadet Una Park of Earth. Cadet Park claims she acted in self-defense. "We will hear both sides and make a judgment based on evidence." Torvak's lead advocate stood first. He was a professional, smooth, confident, experienced. He painted a picture of his client as a promising young cadet from a distinguished family, brutally attacked by a violent alien who had no respect for civilized behavior. "Look at what she did to him," the advocate said, gesturing to Torvak, whose face was still covered in surgical bandages. "This is not self-defense. This is the work of a predator, a monster from a death world who finally showed her true nature." He played the security footage, but only the last 4 seconds, the part where Una destroyed 5 cadets in the blink of an eye. Without context, it looked exactly like what he claimed, a sudden, overwhelming explosion of violence. "We ask that Cadet Park be immediately expelled, charged with assault, and banned from all Galactic Navy facilities," the advocate concluded. "And we ask that serious consideration be given to restricting human access to integrated educational institutions." There was murmuring in the crowd. Some of it sounded like agreement. Commandant Vrel turned to Una. "Cadet Park, you may respond." Una stood. She was small compared to everyone else in the room. Her voice was quiet but clear. "May I ask that the complete security footage be played?" she said. "Not just the last 4 seconds, but the full recording from the moment the gymnasium doors were sealed." The Commandant nodded. "Proceed." The footage played from the beginning. The room watched as Torvak and his friends entered the gymnasium. They watched as he locked the door behind them. They watched as he approached Una, as his friends spread out to block her escape, as he grabbed her shoulder. Only then did Una respond. When the footage ended, the room was silent. "I would also like to enter into evidence 9 reports I filed with Academy administration over the past 3 weeks. Una continued. Reports of missing equipment blocked, meal access, threatening messages, and verbal harassment. All were dismissed without investigation. She placed a data chip on the table. The Commandant's aide collected it and displayed the contents on the main screen. 9 reports. 9 rejections. A clear pattern of systematic abuse. "I did not want this fight," Una said. "I came to this academy to learn, to train, and to represent my species with honor. I ignored the harassment. I stayed silent when my equipment was stolen. I went hungry when my meals were blocked. I deleted threatening messages without responding. I did everything I could to avoid conflict." She turned to face Torvak's family directly. But when 5 cadets cornered me in a locked room, and one of them put his hands on me, I had no choice. I defended myself with the minimum force necessary to end the threat. "Minimum force?" Torvak's father shouted. "You destroyed my son's face." "Your son's face will heal," Una replied calmly. "If I had used maximum force, your son would be dead. All 5 of them would be dead. I know 17 ways to kill a Keleth with my bare hands. I used none of them. I chose to break bones instead of necks. I chose to cause pain instead of death. That was my mercy." The room went very quiet. Commandant Vrel leaned forward. "You are saying that you could have killed them, but chose not to?" "Yes, sir. Humans are trained for many levels of response. We can calibrate our violence to match the threat. Cadet Torvak was a bully, not an assassin. He deserved to be defeated, not killed. So I defeated him." The commandant studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to the Academy's administrative officer. "Officer Das, is it true that Cadet Park filed 9 harassment reports that were dismissed?" Das shifted uncomfortably. "The reports were deemed insufficient for formal action, sir." "Insufficient." The commandant's voice was cold. 9 reports over 3 weeks. Missing equipment. Blocked meal access. Threatening communications. You considered all of this insufficient? I made a judgment call, sir. You made a mistake." Vrel turned back to the room. "This hearing is concluded. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Cadet Park acted in clear self-defense after extended harassment that this Academy failed to address. Cadet Torvak and his 4 accomplices are expelled, effective immediately. Officer Das will report to my office tomorrow to discuss his failures." Torvak's father rose, his face purple with rage. "You cannot do this. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Commandant Vrel replied. "And I know what your son is. A coward who attacks people in groups and then cries when he faces consequences. Take him home, Senator. Teach him better values before he gets himself killed." The hearing was over. Justice had been served. But as Una walked out of the assembly hall, she knew this was not the end. She had made powerful enemies today. Torvak's family would not forget. They would not forgive. But she had also proven something important. Humans could be pushed, could be hurt, could be threatened, but they would not break. And when forced to fight, they fought to win. The galaxy was watching, and they were starting to understand. The harassment started small, like drops of water before a flood. On her 3rd week at the Academy, Una opened her equipment locker before combat training and found it empty. Her practice armor, her training weapons, her protective gloves all gone. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty space where her things should have been. "Cadet Park," the instructor called out. "Why are you not in formation?" "My equipment is missing, sir." The instructor, a Drossic with a long serpentine body, slithered over to look. His eyes narrowed. "Missing?" "Equipment does not simply go missing. You must have misplaced it." "I did not misplace it, sir. It was here yesterday." "Then perhaps you should be more careful with your belongings." The instructor turned away. "You will sit out today's training. Report to the supply office for replacement equipment." Una sat on the bench and watched the other cadets practice. Across the training floor, Torvak caught her eye and smiled. He made no effort to hide it. He wanted her to know. She said nothing. The next week, her meal account was flagged for contamination review. The system said that human food required special testing to make sure it would not poison other species. This was not true. Human food had been cleared months ago, but the flag remained in place for 5 days. 5 days without access to the dining hall. 5 days of surviving on emergency ration bars she had packed in her bag. Kira noticed that her roommate was getting thinner. She saw the dark circles forming under Una's eyes. She heard her stomach growling during late-night study sessions. Are you eating enough? Kira asked one night. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Yuna closed her datapad and rubbed her eyes. There's a problem with my meal account. It's being fixed. What kind of problem? The kind that fixes itself in a few days. Yuna forced a smile. Don't worry about me. Focus on your studies. But Kira did worry. She started bringing extra food from the dining hall, tucking small containers of nutrient paste and fruit slices into her bag. She would leave them on Yuna's desk without saying anything. Yuna never mentioned it, but she always ate them. The anonymous messages started after that. They appeared on Yuna's personal com at random times, day and night. Some were simple. Go home, Deathworlder. Others were more creative. We know where you sleep. We know you're alone. One day you won't wake up. Yuna deleted each message without responding. She did not report them. She knew that without proof of who sent them, nothing would be done. And even if she could prove it, complaining would only make her look weak. Sunho Lee found her one evening at the Small Earth Foods cafe near the civilian section of the station. He was an engineer who had come to Orionis 7 2 years ago to help maintain the station's life support systems. He was 10 years older than Yuna, with kind eyes and a quiet voice. You look terrible, he said, sitting down across from her. Thank you. That's very nice to hear. He pushed a bowl of soup across the table. Eat. You look like you haven't had a real meal in weeks. Yuna looked at the soup. It was kimchi jjigae, the same kind her grandmother used to make. The smell brought tears to her eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. How did you know I was here? She asked. Small community. Humans on this station stick together. Sunho leaned back in his chair. I've been hearing things about you. About what's happening at the academy. What things? That you're being targeted. That someone's making your life difficult. Yuna picked up her spoon and stirred the soup. It's nothing I can't handle. Yuna. Sunho's voice was gentle but firm. I was a cadet once too. Not here. Back on Earth. I know what hazing looks like. And I know when it crosses the line from hazing into something worse. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she started talking. She told him about the missing equipment, the blocked meals, the threatening messages. She told him about the looks and the whispers, about feeling like prey surrounded by predators. She told him about Torvak and his friends, about how they watched her like hunters waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sunho listened without interrupting. When she finished, his face was hard. You need to report this, he said. I have. 9 times. Nothing happens. Then you go higher. You contact the human embassy. You make noise until someone listens. Yuna shook her head. I can't. If I complain, they'll say I'm weak. They'll say humans can't handle the pressure. Every human who comes after me will have to deal with that reputation. And if you stay silent, if you let them push you until you break, I won't break. Sunho studied her face. He saw something there that he recognized, a stubbornness that went beyond pride, a determination that went beyond training. It was something that every human carried in their blood, passed down through millions of years of evolution. The refusal to give up. The will to survive at any cost. What's your plan? He asked. Right now? Survive. Graduate. Prove that humans belong here. And if they escalate, if they move from harassment to violence, Yuna's eyes changed. For just a moment, Sunho saw something behind them, something old and cold and very, very dangerous. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual calm expression. Then I'll respond appropriately, she said. Sunho nodded slowly. Be careful. These aliens don't understand what they're dealing with. They see a small human female and they think you're harmless. I know. They don't realize that on Earth, some of the deadliest creatures are also the smallest. They don't realize that humans domesticated wolves and rode elephants and hunted lions with nothing but sharpened sticks. Una smiled, and this time it was genuine. We also invented nuclear weapons. Exactly. Sunho stood up. Eat your soup. Get some rest. And remember, you're not alone here. The human community has your back, even if you can't see us. He left, and Una finished her soup in silence. Outside the cafe window, the station hummed with activity. Aliens of 100 species went about their lives, unaware of the small drama playing out in their midst. Somewhere on the station, Torvak was meeting with his friends, planning his next move. He was tired of waiting. The human wasn't breaking like she was supposed to. If anything, she was getting stronger. Her grades were rising. Her combat scores were improving. She was making a fool of him. It was time, he decided, to take more direct action. He did not know that he was making the worst mistake of his life. The secondary gymnasium was empty when Una arrived. The lights were dim, set to nighttime mode. The training mats covered the floor in neat squares. Practice weapons hung on racks along the walls. It was late. Most cadets were sleeping or studying, but Una preferred to train. When no one was watching, she changed into her workout clothes and began her warm-up. Stretches first, then basic movements. Her body flowed through the patterns she had learned since childhood. On Earth, she had trained in 3 different martial arts. Her father had been a soldier. Her mother had been a police officer. Fighting was in her blood. She was halfway through a combat form when she heard the door seal behind her. Una stopped. She turned slowly. Torvak stood at the entrance with 4 of his friends. They were all large. They were all watching her with cold eyes. The door indicator showed red locked from the inside. Training alone? Torvak asked. His voice echoed in the empty room. How dedicated. How impressive. Una lowered her hands but did not relax. The door seems to be stuck, does it? How strange. Torvak walked forward, his 4 arms hanging loose at his sides. His friends spread out behind him, forming a half circle. We were hoping to have a private conversation with you, Deathworlder. My name is Una. I don't care what your name is. Torvak stopped 3 meters away, close enough to reach her in a few steps. What I care about is your presence at this academy. Your species doesn't belong here. You never did. And I think it's time someone reminded you of that. Una's heart was beating faster now, but her voice remained steady. I don't want any trouble. Then you should have stayed on your toxic little planet. Torvak's scales rippled with anger. Do you know how many generations of my family attended this academy? Do you know how hard we worked to build what we have? And now they let animals like you walk through our halls like you're our equals. I'm going to leave now, Una said. She took a step toward the door. Torvak moved to block her. I don't think so. Let me pass. Make me. Una looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the others 4 more bodies between her and the exit. She calculated distances, angles, speeds. She identified weak points in their stances. She noticed that one of them was slightly favoring his left leg, probably an old injury. All of this happened in less than a second. Last chance, she said quietly. Walk away. Right now. Pretend this never happened. Torvak laughed. Are you threatening me? You? A tiny mammal from a Class 12 gravity well? He leaned closer, his face near hers. What are you going to do? Bleed on me? He reached out and grabbed her shoulder. What happened next would be studied by military analysts for years. The station's security cameras captured everything. Forensic specialists would later slow the footage down to frame by frame to understand exactly how a single human female dismantled 5 trained combat cadets in under 4 seconds. The moment Torvak's hand touched her shoulder, Yuna moved. Her right hand came up and caught his wrist. She twisted not a random motion, but a precise application of force to a joint that the callous anatomy was not designed to protect. There was a wet cracking sound as tendons tore and bones separated. Torvik had no time to scream. Before the pain signals could reach his brain, Yuna's knee was already rising. It connected with his face at exactly the right angle, shattering the crystalline bone structure that gave callous faces their shape. Purple blood sprayed across her training clothes. The other four rushed forward. They were trained fighters. They had practiced combat for years, but they had never faced anything like this. Yuna did not fight like the aliens expected. She did not block and counter. She did not wait for openings. She flowed through them like water through stones, always moving, always striking. She used their own momentum against them, redirecting their attacks until they crashed into each other. One of them tried to grab her from behind. She dropped her weight, spun, and drove her elbow into his throat. He went down gagging. Another swung all four of his fists at her head. She stepped inside his reach, too close for him to hit, and delivered 3 rapid strikes to nerve clusters along his spine. His arms went limp at his sides. The last 2 attackers hesitated. They had seen what she did to their friends. They had seen how fast she moved. For the first time, they understood the stories about Earth. They understood why humans were called Deathworlders. They were still hesitating when Yuna finished them. 4 seconds. That was all it took. 4 seconds from the moment Torvik touched her to the moment she stood, alone in a circle of broken bodies. She was not breathing hard. Her expression had not changed. She looked down at Torvik, who was curled on the floor with his hands covering his ruined face. Purple blood pooled beneath him. "I warned you," she said softly. Then she walked to the door, entered her cadet override codes, and stepped out into the hallway. Behind her, Torvik finally found the strength to scream. Yuna went directly to the commandant's office. The building was technically closed for the night, but she knew there would be a duty officer. She walked through the empty corridors, her footsteps echoing on the metal floor. Her clothes were stained with alien blood. Her hands were steady. The duty officer, a young Velasi, stared at her with wide eyes. "I need to file a report," Yuna said. "I was attacked in the secondary gymnasium by 5 cadets. I defended myself. They will need medical attention." The officer fumbled with his communications panel. I'll call the commandant. Thank you." Yuna sat down in one of the waiting chairs. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked perfectly calm, like someone waiting for a bus stop inside. Her mind was racing. She knew what would happen next. There would be questions. There would be accusations. Torvik's family was powerful. They would demand justice. They would call her a monster, a killer, a beast from a death planet who attacked innocent students. But she also had the truth. She had the security footage. She had 9 reports of harassment that had been ignored. She had done nothing wrong. The hardest part was over. Now came the politics. Yuna closed her eyes and waited for the storm to begin. 6 months passed like water flowing over stones. Yuna returned to her classes the day after the hearing. She expected hostility, whispers, fear. Instead, she found something unexpected. Other cadets nodded at her in the hallways. Instructors treated her with new respect. Even species who had avoided her before now approached her with curious questions. "Is it true you could have killed them?" A young Drossic asked her one day after combat training. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" Yuna considered the question carefully. Because killing them would have been easy. Showing mercy was harder. And the harder choice is usually the right one. The Drossic slithered away looking thoughtful. Yuna noticed that several other cadets had been listening. Good. Let them think about what she said. Her friendship with Kira grew stronger. The Velothi had been terrified of her roommate at first, but fear had transformed into respect, and respect had grown into something deeper. They studied together, ate together, trained together. When other cadets mocked Kira for living with a Deathworlder, she simply shrugged. "She's the best roommate I've ever had," Kira would say. "She's quiet, she's clean, and she can protect me from literally anything." Sunho continued to visit whenever he could. He brought food from the Earth Cafe and news from the human community on the station. More humans were arriving every month: engineers, scientists, diplomats, traders. What had once been a handful of lonely pioneers was becoming a real community. "You changed things," Sunho told her one evening. "Before your hearing, a lot of species still saw us as monsters. Now they're starting to see us as people. Dangerous people, maybe. But people. I didn't do anything special," Yuna replied. "I just survived. That's what humans do. We survive. And somehow, that's the most impressive thing in the galaxy." Graduation day arrived on a clear station morning. The assembly hall was decorated with flags from 47 different species. Families and dignitaries filled the seats. Cameras broadcast the ceremony across the galaxy. Yuna graduated third in her class. When her name was called, she walked to the stage to receive her commission. The room applauded, not the polite, quiet applause of before, but real, genuine celebration. Somewhere in the crowd, she could hear Akira cheering. She could see Sunho nodding with pride. Admiral G.A. Kang pinned the officer's insignia to her uniform. The Admiral was the first human to hold flag rank in the Galactic Navy, a legend among her people. Her eyes were warm as she shook Yuna's hand. "Well done, Lieutenant Park," she said quietly. "You made us proud." "Thank you, Admiral. I tried my best. Your best was more than enough." After the ceremony, there was a reception in the observation deck. Yuna stood apart from the crowd, looking out at the stars. She was tired. She was happy. She was already thinking about her next assignment, a posting to a patrol ship on the frontier, where new systems were being explored and new challenges waited. Kira found her there. 2 glasses of celebration drink in her crystalline hands. "You're hiding," Kira said, offering one of the glasses. "I'm thinking." "Same thing." "For you." Kira stood beside her, looking out at the same stars. "Can I ask you something? Something personal?" "Of course." "Back in the gymnasium, when Torvek attacked you." Kira paused, choosing her words carefully. "You said you could have killed them all. You said it would have been easy. What did you mean?" Yuna was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "On Earth, we have a long history. Millions of years of survival. We hunted and were hunted. We fought and were fought. We learned every way to end a life, because knowing how to kill was the only way to stay alive." She turned to face her friend. In the dim light of the observation deck, her eyes seemed very old. "Humans aren't dangerous because we're strong, Kira. We're not even the strongest species on our own planet. We're dangerous because we're precise. We can control exactly how much force we use. We can wound without killing. We can threaten without attacking. We can hold back our full power and use only what's needed." "That sounds exhausting," Kira said. "It is." Yuna smiled slightly. "But it's also what makes us who we are. Any animal can kill in a blind rage. It takes something more to hold that rage in check. To look at your enemy and choose mercy instead of death." Kira nodded slowly. "And that's what you did with Torvek." "Yes, I could have ended him in the first second. I could have destroyed all 5 of them before they knew what was happening. But that would have made me a monster. That would have proved everyone right about humans. So instead, I showed them something else." "What?" "That mercy is a choice." Yuna's voice hardened, just slightly. "And if it's a choice, That means we can also choose differently. We can choose to be kind, patient, forgiving. We can also choose to be terrifying beyond imagination. Every species in this galaxy should understand that. When a human shows you mercy, you should be grateful. Because the alternative is worse than they can possibly imagine. The observation deck was quiet. Outside the window, the stars burned in the eternal darkness. Ships moved in the distance, traders, patrols, explorers. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders. "You're kind of scary, you know," Kira said finally. "I know." Yuna laughed softly. "But I'm also your friend. And I will never hurt you. That's my choice. That's my promise. I believe you." Kira put her arm around Yuna's shoulder, a gesture of friendship that she had learned from watching humans. "So what now? What comes next for the famous Lieutenant Park? Work, duty, service." Yuna looked out at the stars. "And maybe, someday, a galaxy where humans don't have to prove themselves anymore. Where we can just be people, like everyone else." "That sounds nice." "It does." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the universe spin slowly past. Behind them, the reception continued. Music played. Cadets laughed and celebrated. The future stretched out like an endless ocean. Somewhere in that future, Yuna knew there would be more challenges, more enemies, more tests of her strength and her mercy. But she was ready. She had been ready all her life. She was human, and humans never gave up. Far away, on a transport ship heading back to Calispace, Torvik looked at his reconstructed face in a mirror. The surgeons had done good work, but he would always carry scars. Every time he looked at himself, he would remember. He would remember a small human woman in a training gymnasium. He would remember the moment when everything changed. He would remember the feeling of complete helplessness as she took him, apart in less than a heartbeat. And he would remember the lesson she taught him. The lesson that the galaxy was beginning to understand. Never threaten a human. Never corner a human. Never ever touch a human without permission. Because the next human might not choose mercy. And that was a thought that would haunt Torvak's nightmares for the rest of his long and very cautious life.